Parish orphans and retrogrades, happy Thursday. In today's episode of Rules for Retrogrades, I am going to discuss the meaning of the Synod on Synodality in context, particularly the context of the first major bit of Vatican news, which has broken post-Synod on Synodality 2023, is from literally the source Vatican News. And it is this: Pope, Theology must interpret the gospel for today's world in a new motu proprio submitted by Pope Francis ad Theologiam Provendum. Pope Francis updates the statutes of the Pontifical Academy of Theology, calling it to courageous cultural revolution, and commitment to dialogue in the light of revelation. This follows, parish orphans and retrogrades, upon a Pope-splaining choir loft's worth of babble over the last month, saying that there will not be a cultural revolution led by Pope Francis in Synod 23. So, in today's show, I'm going to tell you what this new motu proprio really means. Its context is this fruitful period of synodality between the 23 and 24 sessions of the Synod on Synodality. Everything must be delivered in that context. It's going to be a good show, a very revealing show. Stay tuned. Because there has been so much of a return to pontifical critique by this channel, which is just necessary, honest Catholic laymen's knowledgeable set of observations and responses to what Francis is doing, leading a cultural revolution from inside the church. I want you all to return really quickly to the 4 pillars of this channel, which have nothing to do with critiquing popes. We are faithful yet bold Catholics as retrogrades. We are faithful yet bold parish orphans, meaning we always follow the lead of a North Star, which is the Roman Catholic Church. And there are 4 pillars of that: subsidiarity, patriarchy, education, and of course, right-wing community organizing. Those are the 4 pillars of Rules for Retrogrades. And as such, we focus on positive content when there's not major breaking, subversive news coming out of Pope Francis's Vatican. Spend a lot of late 2022 and early 2023 focusing on the positive things we can do which surround those 4 pillars. What you can do, parish orphans and retrogrades, is support this channel. You can like this video, subscribe to this video, and support the channel on Locals or Subscribestar. We have a free Lord of the Rings reading group for Locals and Subscribestar supporters on Wednesday nights. We're now 4 chapters into Fellowship of the Ring. What you can also do to support the 4 pillars of this channel are 2 things. Also on Wednesday nights, beginning next week, Wednesday at 5 p.m. CST, November the 8th, is join the free Aristotle's Ethics weekly class. I am teaching because it's the most important text in the Western canon, a once-a-week Aristotle's Ethics lecture course. We're going to run through it in as close to 10 weeks as we can, quicker than I've gone through it before. It's live, it's free, it's Wednesdays at 5 CST. Totally free. All we do is we ask for donations, not for the channel, not for any work we do. It's unrelated to the class. Just a suggested donation of $100 to me, the man, just because you know what I'm up against as a man, a dad with a webcam. Unrelated donation, but it's totally free for those who need it. A lot of people say, hey, we were meaning to donate to you anyway. That Aristotle's Ethics class begins Wednesday at 5 p.m. 6 days from today, November the 8th. A week after that, a week and a day after that, will be Thursday, November the 16th. This is popular demanded. An Ask Your Husband book club led by none other than Steph Gordon. That will meet once every 2 weeks. And she's going through the 8 chapters of Ask Your Husband. That has been on request for 2 years now. A Steph-led Ask Your Husband book club. We like wives to be in it, or wives with their husbands. That's also absolutely free. But again, she is the mother of a large family. Unrelated donations, just to Steph, the woman, mother of a large family, are requested there. Again, suggested donation, $100. If you want to donate, that's not for the channel. That's not for anything we do. That's just for us, Catholic to Catholic. You know what we're up against. And donations are taken at timothyjgordon.com. Just click donate for unrelated donations, unrelated to the ethics class beginning November the 8th, or the Ask Your Husband book club event beginning November the 16th. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I want to take you to, for starters today, the Synod on Synodality is done. It's done and dusted in its 2023 meeting, but it's not done and dusted as a quote-unquote synod. Why? Because it concludes in October of 2024. The synod will be followed, as all synods are, by a post-synodal apostolic exhortation. For those of you like Sohrab Ahmari who don't know, all synods have magisterial documents which follow the synod, post-synodal exhortations, in every case. Those are low-level magisterial documents which, in the Francis era, can make a change to Catholic teaching. And by can, I don't even know what I mean. I'm not going to get into it. In the 2014-2015 family synods, the gatherings themselves could affect no change. They can't. That simply can't happen. So for Pope-splainers like Sohrab Ahmari, who I was going back and forth with on Twitter earlier today, to say nothing changed in the 2014 Synod, in the 2015 Synod, in the 2023 Synod, meaning the gathering itself is fundamentally duplicitous. It is fundamentally either misunderstanding or outright dishonest. Very, very fundamentally dishonest or duplicitous. A synod leads to, which is not an ecumenical council, can't make change on its own, leads to a post-synodal apostolic exhortation when it concludes, like the point after a touchdown. Touchdown for 6 points, point after, or 2-point conversion after it. The Synod on Synodality concluded in its 23 phase last week, but there will be a post-synodal apostolic exhortation sometime after the final session in October of 2024. Post-synodal. It's like the point after a touchdown. Like the 2016 post-synodal apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, which deconstructed the Roman Catholic teaching on divorce and adultery, the 2024 or early 2025 post-synodal apostolic exhortation, insert title here, I don't know what it will be called, will destroy much on sex relations, women deaconesses, SS unions, things like that. We don't know to precisely what extent, but the point is we have Pope-splainers out there like Sohrab Ahmari tweeting this. This comes from a couple days ago, but we were trading tweets this morning. He said, no fundamental changes to Catholicism took place at the latest synod. They can't. Synods can't make the changes. The Pope in the exhortation afterwards makes the change, like in 2016. He continues, nor was the faith deconstructed as conservatives and traditionalists had feared and warned. He's taking a shot at Eric Sammons, editor of Crisis, whom I would like to defend, and whom I did defend on Twitter, along with my own good name. Sorab doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Synods can't make changes. Post-synodal apostolic exhortations apparently can in the Francis era, because Francis did so with Amoris Laetitia. He said maybe the ecclesial right wing needs to put more trust in the successor of Peter. I responded to Sorab, you're still new to the faith and weren't a Catholic during the 2014-2015 synods, and thus don't even realize that a synod may affect zero magisterial change. As in 2014 and 2015, Francis will change the magisterium via a post-synodal apostolic exhortation. Did you even know this already happened? 2014 Extraordinary Synod, 2015 Ordinary Synod, 2016 Post-Synodal Apostolic Exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, in April. And Sorab smartly responded. I was trying to really talk to him. He said, I may be a convert, but you have a more fundamental problem, namely a reading comprehension deficit. In my piece, I quote trads like Eric Sammons, who warned that the synod itself, would lead to a deconstruction of Catholicism, easy to refute and done. Wrong. Eric responded to it on his own merits, but Eric said it would lead to a deconstruction of Catholicism. Lead, as in a touchdown, which leads to the point after.
As in lead.
As in
An
leads.
English word. Lead.
Leads. Eric Sammons, nor myself, failed to say that the synod would itself deconstruct Catholicism, but it would lead via the only way that it can, the only magisterial signpost that it leaves, is to the Pope, who has the authority to write a post-synod exhortation. And Francis has done this before, and Francis must do it again. On the other, I think it was a week and a half ago, I concluded the synod by playing you clips from September, this show, Rules for Retrogrades, where I said, nothing will happen at this synod that is definitive because nothing can happen at any synod which is definitive. Instead, they will flirt with bad ideas, they being the people running the synod, including Francis, and it will then flower between these two synods, between October 23 and October 24, and they will probably have more of a coming out party in 24, but will still be waiting for the post-synodal apostolic exhortation in probably early 2025. I played the clip. I said that I made the quote from the clip in late September. I can only do so much reminding. I wrote back to Eric, but you can't see the close conceptual connection between the synod, a non-magisterial, unecumenical gathering, which by definition can't make a change, and the post-synodal exhortation, which by definition cannot come out until after October 2024. This synod isn't even over, so Rab.
It's funny that he was trying to slam you on reading comprehension when he doesn't even know what the basic word lead means.
He doesn't know.
Yeah. It's like one word. It's like he doesn't even, what lead means is a very specific meaning.
Lead means lead. And literally, Sorab, and for that matter, all of the Pope-splainers are literally just taking credit for the fact that the point after must come before a touchdown in order for their construal of Eric Sammons or my view to come to pass. All we're saying is we are figuratively between the scoring of the touchdown and the point after. And they're like, well, they didn't kick the point after during regulation play. Well, the point after it's not a play during regulation in football. Point after only is the point after the touchdown. The post-synodal exhortation is only post a synod. And guess what? You know why Francis isn't writing one now? because the synod's not over yet. He only writes it after the final session of the synod. There was no exhortation after the extraordinary synod on the family in 2014, so rab. There's only a post-synodal exhortation after the 2015 ordinary synod. And thus it will be after next year's October synod. Okay? It's fine and God is good that we have converts to the faith. Why the converts to the faith have taken upon themselves to talk about that which they have no clue is embarrassing for them and for Catholicism.
It's a lot of them. I've noticed a lot of people new to the faith are making these sorts of assertions online, and then like Catholics who know what's happening will point it out to them and be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, and then they get snotty. They get uppity. This is literally exactly how it worked at 2014 and 2015 synods before AL in 2016. AL being Amoris Laetitia. Big announcement of change in 2014 by Francis himself and his lieutenants. Then an announced kind of signaled back off in 2015 at the second synod. And then Amoris Laetitia, which proved that it was the plan all along. The reason this is important now, parish orphans and retrogrades, is because Archbishop Hans Overbeck, I think it's Hans, maybe I'm just making that up. Bishop Overbeck from Germany said the most fruitful time of the Synod on Synodality would be between October 23 and October 24. This is when they're setting everything up. October 24 will be a kind of announcement, and then the post-synodal exhortation will be a kind of definitive announcement. Now, that's the context for what is going on with Francis issuing new statutes for the Vatican's PAT, Pontifical Academy for Theology. Here's a direct quote from the beginning of this new motu proprio. Promoting theology in the future cannot be limited to abstractly reproposing formulas and schemes of the past. He calls for reading and interpreting the gospel in current conditions. Promoting theology in the future cannot be limited to abstractly reproposing formulas and schemes of the past. He calls for reading and interpreting the gospel in current conditions. This is precisely an honest statement of what the goals of the Synod on Synodality are. Theology cannot be stodgy, according to Francis's categories. It cannot be stilted, according to Francis's categories. It can't be hortatory, meaning it can't just exhort people to do the right thing, or idealistic, according to Francis's categories. It's got to get down on all fours and be a member of the world. That's what the Synod on Synodality was about with regard to SS unions, with regard to Homo sapien style attraction, with regard to female leadership in the church, which is a contradiction in terms. Christ instantiated a patriarchy, and inerrant scripture forbids females from ever having authority over males inside the clerical patriarchy and inside the household patriarchy, the bifurcated patriarchy that is Christianity. And we didn't hear much about viri probati, Western Rite priests getting married. And that's the least problematic one. If they wanted to allow Latin Rite priests to get married, that's actually not a set, closed path. Whereas female deacons and making any kind of change to sexual moral theology are closed paths. Here's the way the Vatican News pitches the new motu proprio. So this is as sympathetic as you're going to hear. Theology must interpret the gospel for today's world is the title of the article. In a new motu proprio, ad theologiam provendum, Pope Francis updates the statutes of the Pontifical Academy of Theology. And provendum is a gerundive grammatically in Latin. So it gives you a sense, if you know any kind of Latin grammar, no, maybe I'm wrong. Hold on, I'm looking at my line. Is that a gerundive? Maybe it's not. It's calling us to promovendum. Never mind, I read it wrong. Scrap what I just said. Ad theologiam promovendum. Pope Francis updates the statutes of the Pontifical Academy of Theology, calling it to courageous cultural revolution and commitment to dialogue in the light of revelation. I thought we had a gerundive here, which would have been an interesting grammatical point I hadn't noticed when I was researching this morning. Scrap that. It's just a regular title. A church that is, quote, synodal, missionary, and goes forth needs a theology that, quote, goes forth too. That's the thought behind Pope Francis's new motu proprio, ad theologiam promovendum, dated the 1st of November, 2023, which updates the statutes of the Pontifical Academy of Theology. This is what motu proprios do. They update governing rules for other dicasteries or subsets within the curia or the hierarchy. So it's a rule for rules. Established canonically by Clement the 11th on 23 April 1718, with the brief Inscrutabili, the Academy aimed to place theology at the service of the church and the world. It has evolved over the years into a group of scholars called to investigate and deepen theological themes of particular relevance. Now, for the Holy Father, it is time to revise the norms that regulate its activities to make them, quote, more suited to the mission that our times impose on theology. Francis is building on the Synod on Synodality to play on the Clementine notion of service of the church and the world, which is just the idea that theology serves man to know God and to serve God. It's like helping the helper. Now he's bending that and modifying that Clementine message to make them more suited to the mission that our times impose on theology. He means he's going to change the supposed demands of moral theology itself. That's a subtle sleight of hand, but there's a difference between saying we want to make clear to you what theology demands of you, the lay faithful, and we want to bend the propositions that theology demands of you, the lay faithful. Opening up to the world and to humanity with its problems, its wounds, its challenges, its potential, theological reflection must make room for, quote, an epistemological and methodological rethinking, and is therefore called to a courageous cultural revolution. So, an epistemological, that means the knowledge-based, you're setting a new ground by which what constitutes knowledge is truly said to constitute theological knowledge. You want to rethink that ground. Totally anathema. Not open to the faithful Catholic. And methodological rethinking, that can mean virtually anything. But the clue here is the epistemological rethinking that Francis is calling for. Not open to a faithful Catholic. Therefore called to a courageous cultural revolution, this could mean anything. Francis uses subversive Marxist language like this in all of his writings, and Pope-splainers can Pope-splain on the basis that, well, anything can be called a courageous cultural revolution. Spreading the gospel is a courageous cultural revolution, isn't it? Well, that's all Francis wants to do, just in a modern context. So they'll always play with his words there as if he's a faithful son of the church trying to evangelize. I'm telling you that the epistemological rethinking that he's calling for is the tell that he means subversive not to the Novus Ordo Seclorum, but subversive to the traditional church and the traditional set of teachings accompanying the church. What is needed is a fully contextual theology, direct quote, writes the Pope, capable of, quote, reading and interpreting the gospel and the conditions in which men and women live daily in different geographical, social, and cultural environments. Now, what for 2,000 years plus has been a fully contextual theology capable of reading and interpreting the gospel and the conditions in which men and women live daily in different conditions? The magisterium of the Roman Catholic faith, as it's existed for over 2,000 years. That's what. But now he's saying we need something we've never had before, a fully contextual theology that is capable of doing something that Francis says the church has not been capable of doing so far, reading and interpreting the gospel. Do you see the problem? I hope you do. The gospel has been read and interpreted since the church canonized it, and the teachings of moral theology, natural law and some supernatural law, have always been the exact same. Francis is now saying we have to change what those demands are said to be, the demands of moral theology, or else we're not being realistic. The next section is called Dialogue with Different Traditions and Disciplines, and Francis will tip his hand here. Theology must develop in a culture of dialogue and encounter between different traditions and different disciplines, between different Christian denominations and different religions, the letter says. It must engage openly with all, believers and non-believers alike. This is the approach of transdisciplinarity, Francis specifies. The Apostolic Constitution, Veritatis Gaudium, explains that this means situating, quote, and stimulating all disciplines against the backdrop of the light and life offered by the wisdom streaming from God's revelation. For this reason, theology must, quote, make use of new categories developed by other forms of knowledge. This is suspicious. Theology's always been queen of the sciences. In order to penetrate and communicate the truths of faith and transmit the teaching of Jesus in today's languages. Theology, the queen of sciences, has always coexisted with the speculative sciences, the other high sciences like math and philosophy, and with the merely practical sciences like all the other studies. And it must do so with originality and critical awareness. The next section is called a pastoral stamp in this Vatican News article. Then there is the contribution that theology can make to the current debate of rethinking thought. We're not using the term rethinking, he is. Showing itself as a discipline of wisdom to be a true critical discipline. It's already shown itself to be a true discipline. Critical discipline means Marxist. Theology is a discipline that must not be abstract and ideological, but spiritual. Abstraction is not and has never been considered in the Catholic intellectual tradition to be ideological. Abstraction has always been considered to be the opposite of ideological, right? Metaphysics is the two highest sciences are theology and metaphysics. In theology, you study God, who's pure act itself. And in metaphysics, one studies the creatures, which merely participate in 10 categories of existence, which participate in God's pure act. So you have theology, the study of the creator, metaphysics, the study of the creatures. Two opposite but speculative disciplines that are the highest of all the others. Theology at one end, where you're studying God the Creator, and metaphysics, where you're studying the 10 categories of created being itself. They're opposites, but they're both speculative. They're both very abstract. Neither has ever in the history of the Roman Catholic intellectual tradition been considered ideological, crass, rote, base, debased, political. This is a reversal of paradigms. It should be worked out on one's knees, Francis says, pregnant with adoration and prayer, a transcendent discipline, and at the same time attentive to the voice of the people. It is a popular theology that the Pope calls for, mercifully addressed to the open wounds of humanity and creation, and within the folds of human history, to which it prophesies the hope of an ultimate fulfillment. All this flowery language means Francis is charging real philosophy and real theology, as it's existed for 2,000 years, with being out of touch. It is a popular theology that the Pope calls for, quote, mercifully addressed to the open wounds of humanity and creation and within the folds of history. In practice, for Francis, theology as a whole must take on a pastoral stamp, and therefore theological reflection must start, quote, from the different contexts and concrete situations in which peoples find themselves, placing itself at the service of evangelization. What he means here, let's use his heresy, his material heresy from the 2014-2015 synods. Take a divorced and civilly remarried Christian, civilly divorced and remarried. Well, they find themselves civilly divorced and remarried. Francis wants to say, well, you're not really divorced. He wants to avoid saying what Catholics have always said to the world, what we said to King Henry VIII, what John the Baptist said to Herod and Herodias. You might think you're divorced, but you're not. In God's eyes, you're still married. Divorce does not exist. Therefore, return to your true spouse, stop committing adultery, and live the rest of your life with your true spouse. God recognizes only your true spouse, even though the world recognizes this emperor's new clothes fake spouse, a second spouse, a new marriage. You don't find yourself remarried. You, quote, find yourself, divorcees, living in an adulterous legal situation where legally people have agreed to call this concubine your second wife or husband. That's where you find yourself. And the church has always, from across the different contexts and concrete situations, said, no, it's our job to pastorally and lovingly tell you, you are with a concubine, not a second spouse. There's no such thing as a second spouse. Return home to your spouse. Stop committing adultery. But Francis now wants to use language like pastoral stamp to flip the script, as he did in 2014, 2015, 2016, vis-a-vis divorce and remarriage. He wants to say, no, these people really are remarried. We, the church, have to start recognizing that and stop holding their feet to the fire when they woke up to find themselves as if there's no moral culpability in a second marriage. There is no second marriage. What would be a true pastoral stamp is announcing, as the church always has, you can't get divorced. It's impossible. We're not saying you shouldn't prescriptively. We're saying you can't descriptively, because God only accepts your first spouse as your spouse. Now, this is a fait accompli, parish orphans and retrogrades. 2014, 2015, 2016 was Francis altering the unalterable. And we have not dealt with this yet. Why do you think it's still stuck in my craw? Francis changed the unchangeable. He stuck the change into the Acte Apostolicae Sedis, and We can't punish him. We can't judge him. But the cardinals have not yet taken the action pursuant to Francis's action that will be necessary. Nullifying it, undoing it, declaring it anathema or him an anti-pope or whatever that future action will be. But we cannot, as Catholics, abide divorce. There's no such thing. I just showed you how. That's 2014, 15, 16. I'm talking about Sohrab Ahmari and the tweets back and forth that he and I shared today. Sohrab came in late 2016. He didn't even know about the 2014, 2015 synods and the exhortation which followed in April of 2016. Most of you guys have forgotten them. We're not arguing whether or not Francis will commit material heresy through the synodal process. He already has. We're arguing whether or not he's going to do it again with the 23 and October 24 synods. And I guarantee you, in some way, he will. That's the point of synodality for Pope Francis. But it's not even an open question whether or not he has. He already has. And that's what this Pontifical Academy of Theology motu proprio is all about. Stagliano is a new mission for theology, according to this news article. This is a new mission, says the president of PAT, Monsignor Antonio Stagliano. We wouldn't pronounce the G. It is the mission of promoting engagement and dialogue in every sphere of knowledge in order to reach and invoke the whole people of God in theological research so that the life of the people may become theological life. So what they mean by reach the whole of the people is to say that no matter what any human being is doing, no matter how deeply sinful or offensive to God, we're going to say that they are in the club and that they don't have to cease doing their deeply offensive sin. That's what they mean. There are no adulterers. That's what this new synthetic approach to moral theology is. There are no... I can't even use the term here on YouTube. There are no SS unions which cannot be blessed. It rhymes with Grotamites. There's no more of these categories. That's old Catholic theology. Francis ushered in a new way and a new world, and the moral theology is a thing of the past, where it announces objective norms that God has promulgated, naturally or supernaturally, and we must follow. That, I think Francis has said in the recent past, in the last 6 months, is mortally sinful. Either he did or Tucho Fernandez, his new doctrinal chief, said that. That's mortally sinful to announce what God's law is for us. What moral theology will do from here on out is meet people where they're at and accommodate them. This, parish orphans and retrogrades, is the first step of the interregnum between Synod 23, Synod 24. Remember, we're just talking sessions. The Synod on Synodality is not done yet. It's not done until October 24. Got it? It's very important. I was looking, what will the dicasteries do, particularly Dicastery, Pontifical Academy for Life, or Pontifical Academy for Theology, and this is what they've chosen to do. To release a motu proprio that, more than any other pontifical document in the history of the Church, codifies relativism.